Howard Kingston, my husband. We both were owners. And originally, yeah, we're in our 23rd year. We were 2 doors down in this shop where the photo shop is now, the photographer shop. We were there 12 years, and we're in our 11th year in this building. The Apple estate on that first building we were in, they've just recently sold that to Mr. Grove, who is the photographer. This building, as far back as I can remember, has been owned by Lou Dotrell, and he's the person you're renting. He's the one, I think, who redid the front of the building. I don't recall at all what it looked like before this new facade was put on it.
And it was done a good bit before we got here.
Yeah, it was.
The building was unoccupied when we first moved down 2 doors down. This building was unoccupied, and the inside was redone.
It was made for a restaurant. Actually, originally when it was restored for people for eateries. Because the first thing we remember moving in, when we were on Main Street, moving in here, was a Blimpie Subway. Not sure how long they stayed, but it wasn't that long. Then there was another couple who took it over, and don't recall what their names were, but it was the same thing. It was like a deli. They had cookies and sandwiches, kind of the same thing. Then they were here 2 or 3 years, and this young lady came in and wanted to do a coffee shop, which she also, I think, tried to serve sandwiches, and she wasn't here maybe 2 or 3 years. But she's actually the one who I think did the most restoration. She put in this area where we are now.
To the inside of the building, not to the outside.
Not to the outside.
None of them had changed the outside.
Yeah, the outside was how the landlord did it originally. She put in this center part, and it was a serving counter. And there was this like kitchen area stuff behind us, but there's also 2 bathrooms that she put in this center part. So she did most of the interior.
It was a coffee shop type, but what her theme was.
Put a lot of work, a lot of effort, and bless her heart, she was only here 2 or 3 years.
And Mr. Kingston, you had told us about how there used to be a second story.
Yeah, you could see it from here back because of the low ceiling. And you can see where it went up to. See, there's an attic above this section here. So there was when this building was originally built, they utilized the 2nd floor. But I don't know over the years when they decided not to use it anymore. But it hasn't been for sure since we can remember utilized as a second floor.
In the old shop, we had an upstairs, and well, my kids mostly used that. They played up there, because they grew up.
A lot of these buildings had second floors in them.
Some of them, families lived in them. Yeah, they actually lived upstairs, and we now today have people living on the 2nd floor of some of these buildings, which is nice. It's kind of coming full circle, in some respects.
Right. Anything in general about downtown you would like to mention as a whole?
Well, when we opened up on Main Street in the original building we were in 23 years ago, there wasn't a lot of activity going on Main Street. They had the Worms's was still open, Babineau Shoe Store was still open, and the Boab's, which was on the corner, was still open. And that was all in this block that was open. All these buildings, there were 3 buildings. Next door was the Crims, this building, and the Ackle building where we opened. Those were all empty buildings, hadn't been utilized for a number of years. And also across the street, there was, of course, the little Provost Bar was still open, but just about, there was really not much else on the other side of the street that was open at that time. But since then, we've kind of had a rebirth in the downtown area. They've done in the next block also. The Guggenheim was empty, and several other those buildings down there were empty. But since then, there's been a rebirth, and people have bought some of these old buildings and started to restore them, and really done such a good job with that. Other people would buy other buildings, like across the street. They've done 2 or 3 buildings now, rebirth, and they tried to go back to the original look of the buildings. I know the Guggenheim found the old pictures of his building and tried to model his remodeling of the building on what the old look of the building was, and that's kind of caught on in several of these buildings, and they've really done some really nice work on rebuilding these buildings, and it brought new life into downtown. Now we have a good business section in all of the downtown section. A lot of new interest coming in, businesses are opening up, and a lot more activity downtown now.
But the bottom line is, and we've said this, and Howard has said this often, because it was his business, his family's business, Kingston Construction, who put in a lot of the resurfacing in the parking lot over here. But this was years ago in the early 70s when Mayor Alan Day was had good foresight in taking advantage of these federal funds that were available for improvements in downtown restoration. He capitalized on that grant. And this is when this Bulani parking plaza was built. This has been a staying feature because that has offered so much parking with that gazebo, activities like the gumbo cook-off. So much has come to downtown because of this restoration that was done in the early 70s.
If you wouldn't have had the parking that we have now, Main Street would have continually deteriorated, because you have to have parking for the customers, for the stores to open up, and for the customers to come in and park.
It set the foundation for what these landlords, these entrepreneurs, I'll call them, in restoring old buildings, took, had the interest in doing this because they knew they had a lot to work with.
Now, we lost some old structures when we did the parking lot. There was the old City Hall there with the old jail.
And Gary's drugstore.
And there was an old theater in that block where the parking lot is, and the gazebo. But the city tore all that down and obtained the property and was able to put in the parking lots there.
But those buildings were condemned at that time. They were already condemned.
Oh yeah, they were empty.
And in those days, you didn't have the interest in restoring these buildings. You didn't even have the people out there who had the knowledge of restoring those buildings. That hadn't come to pass yet. So, but still, it turned out it was just in that one area, but it was just sufficient amount of space for this parking.
It was centrally located.
And then these people who came in and started restoring these old buildings, you see, they had something to work with. All this, the planners were in, it made it attractive. And then that's when I think the embellishing started, as far as for enhancing downtown. And that's what brought business here. People taking the interest. We were here before a lot of these buildings they started restoring, but we both had an interest in Main Street because I grew up a block away from Main Street in my younger years. And I was always, I just pulled to Main Street. And of course, he had, some attachment to it. So we knew we wanted to be downtown. And we never regretted it. It's been,